Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another Good Morning Grief Devotion. It's Shabbat. Pastor Corey Allen Duncan Sr. So happy and excited to have this wonderful opportunity to come to you today to lead you in a very special way in today's Good Morning Grief Devotion. This is the daily grief devotion that is strategically designed to help you to navigate through your grief one day at a time. What is grief? I'm so glad you asked. Grief, my brothers and sisters, it is the natural, normal, and necessary response to loss, change, and transition that results in the expressions of feelings and emotions. That grief is what you feel on the inside. Mourning is how you reveal it on the outside. Therefore, we don't suppress it, but we express it. We don't ignore it, but we explore it. We don't conceal it, but we reveal it. We don't lock it up, but we let it out. And that's why we shout good morning, because morning is a good thing. And I'm so grateful that you are here with us. So we lead you today in a very special way. In today's Good Morning Grief Devotion, today, my brothers and sisters, is day 271. We're going to talk about I sit in the wound of my grief. I sit in the wound of my grief. Let's talk about it. Here it is. Experiencing the necessary sadness of grief is sometimes called sitting in your wound. Experiencing the necessary sadness of grief, sometimes called sitting in your wound. When I sit in the wound of my grief, I surrender to it. I acquiesce to the instinct to slow down and turn inward. I allow myself to appropriately wallow in the pain. I shut the world out for a time so that eventually I've created space to let the world back in. Let's talk about it, y'all. Experiencing the necessary pain of your grief is called sitting in your womb. A lot of times therapists will say this, that sometimes we just got to sit in it. We got to sit in it. And it feels uncomfortable, but we got to sit in it, right? We got to sit in the wound of our grief. How do you do it? Why do you do it? When I sit in the womb of my grief, I surrender to it. And I'm not going to run away from it. I surrender. Think about surrender in terms of, when you surrender, when you give up. I surrender, I give up. High speed chase, I surrender, I give up. The police is after me. I surrender. I'm no longer running from you, but I give up. I'm submitting and surrendering, submitting myself unto you, right? Same thing, same concept applies with grief. Some of us are running from the pain. We're running from the reality. We are running from our grief. But when you sit in the wound of it, you surrender to it. You take a moment to say, you know what? I'm not going to run. I'm going to give myself permission to feel what I feel in this moment. I'm not going to run. We run. You see it welling up on the inside of you and you start running. You see it welling up on the inside of you. And what do? You suppress it. You push it back down. You feel it coming on. You feel it coming up. Nope. You get up, you leave, you suppress it. You say, nope, I'm not going to do this today. You start doing other stuff. You do whatever you got to do so you can push it down. But when you sit in the wound of your grief, instead of pushing it down, you go ahead and let that thing come up like a volcano. You just let it erupt. When you sit in the wound of it, instead of running away from it, no, you surrender to it. You give in, you surrender to it, right? So you surrender to it. You acquiesce to the instinct to slow down. I'm about to turn inward. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to turn inward. I'm going to have my moment, right? I allow myself to appropriately wallow in my pain. I'm going to take my moment. I'm going to sit in it. I'm going to surrender to it. I'm going to wallow in my pain. I'm going to scream. I'm going to cry. If I got to kick and punch the floor, I wallow in my, if I got to jump in my bed and scream in my pillow, whatever I got to do, I'm going to have my moment. If I just sit there and just let the tears flow. Sometimes you just sit there and let the tears flow, right? I'm going to wallow in my pain. Y'all, this is what the process looks like. This is what it means, right? To express and not suppress, to not ignore but explore, to not conceal but reveal. This is what it looks like. I allow myself to appropriately wallow in my pain. I shut the world out for a time. I got to shut the world out. I don't care. I'm in a grocery store. I'm shutting the world out. I don't care where I'm at. I don't care. I don't, it makes no difference. I'm sitting in this moment, right? I'm gonna sit in this moment. Think about this. Babies don't care where they at when they use the restroom on themselves. When they babies, they don't care. It don't matter. Excuse me. They don't care, right? They gonna have a moment. They gonna look. I love it. Thank you, Lord. They gonna release that stuff, right? That's what babies do. They gonna release that stuff and they gonna sit in it. Yeah, they gonna sit it until you change them. They gonna sit in it, y'all. And sometimes it doesn't matter where you're at. I gotta shut the world out. I gotta have this moment. It's coming up. I gotta take my moment, right? I gotta take my moment. I gotta have my moment. Shut the world out for a time so that eventually I've created space to let the world back in. I'll create space and let them back in, but I gotta shut them out for a time because I'm sitting in the wound of my grief. Sitting in the wound of my grief teaches me that I'm strong enough to withstand it, that I have the capacity to meet and embrace the depths of my grief. And when I realize this, my grief becomes ever so slightly less overwhelming. I love it, y'all. Sitting in the womb of my grief, it teaches me that I'm strong enough to withstand it. You are strong enough to withstand it. You ever go through something and you like, oh, it wasn't as hard as I thought, or you think it's gonna be super duper hard. You don't think you'll be able to do it. Then you do it. You're like, oh, okay, it wasn't okay. Sitting in your womb, sitting in the womb of your grief, facing it, navigating through the process and going through it, it lets you know that you are strong enough to withstand it, that you have the capacity to meet and embrace the depths of your grief. And when you realize this, y'all, when you realize this, that you do have the capacity to meet and embrace the depths of it. You got the capacity to meet it head on. You got the capacity to embrace the depths of it because it's deep. There's a lot of layers to it. There's a lot to it. It's not just simplistic. There's a lot of layers to it. You got the capacity to meet it, and you got the capacity to deal with the depths of it. Right when you sit in it, that's what you begin to realize. And when I realize this, my grief becomes ever so slightly less overwhelming. It becomes less overwhelming. Excuse me, that grief that was so massive at one point in time, it becomes less overwhelming, like a grief ball. There's just one picture I wish I could show y'all, but it gets smaller and smaller and smaller because you are taking the time to sit in the wound of your grief. It's like you're chipping away at it. If you think about chipping away at something, the more you sit in it, the more you begin to chip away at it, the more you give yourself permission to feel and go through it and navigate the process. You're chipping away, you're chipping away. It becomes less overwhelming, right? Perhaps when you started, it was super duper overwhelming. Took your breath away, panic attacks, hospital, just didn't think you was gonna make it. But the more you do it, oh, it's less overwhelming. It's like, and I'm not, it's just a metaphor, like working out. You ever start working out and like you could barely walk, you could barely walk down the street, right? You could barely walk a mile. And the more you did it, the more you chipped away at it. And now it's less overwhelming. You can knock it out like it ain't nothing. Or you could barely lift a 5 pound barbell. You were so weak you could barely do a push up. But the more you begin to go, you begin to chip away at it. Now you doing a 20 pound barbells like it ain't nothing. Now you knocking out 20 push-ups like it ain't nothing because you just stay consistent. You stay consistent. You chipped away at it, and that look at you now, right? Same thing applies. The more you sit in the wound of your grief, you give yourself permission, right? You navigate through that process. You take your time. You wallow in the pain. The more you do that, the more you chip away at it, right? And it becomes less overwhelming in time because you're actually doing the work. I want to challenge you. Sit in your grief, wallow in your pain, right? Turn inward from the world to yourself, right? Turn inward. Have your moments. The more you do that, the less overwhelming your grief becomes. Check out this final thought. I answer any questions that you have. If you want to drop them in the chat, the final thought simply says, I bear compassionate witness to all of my feelings. I bear compassionate witness to all of my feelings. Your feelings matter, and you have to bear compassionate witness to all of your. Give yourself permission to feel what you feel, right? Give yourself permission to feel what you feel as you navigate through that process. Any questions y'all might have? Good morning to each and every one of y'all. Appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for joining us on today as we continue to navigate in a very special way. I gotta go change me. Hey, Valerie Lewis, I gotta go change me. Ain't that it? I appreciate y'all workout analogy. I see that connection. Yes, Mr. Loris Ryan, you see it, right? The more you chip away at it, it's like, man, I'm making progress, right? And the reverse is true because if you don't go, you start to, instead of gaining ground, you're losing ground. I'm no longer making progress, right? Same thing with your grief. Same exact thing when it comes to your grief, right? You have your moments. I ran into somebody yesterday, the other day, who had lost a loved one, and I'm like, "How things going?" It's like, man, it's all right, but they had a blow up. So man, I had a blow up and just started going off. I said, "Are you seeing anybody? A counselor, a therapist, a coach?" Anybody? Said, "Nope." And I said, "You talk about it much?" "Nope." I said, "That's why you had a blow up." I said, because it's in you. You don't suppress, you got to express. You don't ignore it, you got to explore. You don't conceal, you got to reveal. And if you don't, you're going to start leaking. It's going to ooze out in different ways. And that's one of the ways it oozes out. You're going to blow up. You're going to blow up like a pop bottle. All this stuff waiting to explode. I said, remember this. I said, release brings about relief. Get in a safe place, in a safe space where you can pour out the cares of your heart, where you can let it out, right? Where you can sit in the wound of your grief, where you can wallow in your pain, where you can release, because you'll get some relief. And it's like, man, I appreciate that. And it's so true, right? Because if you don't do the work, if you don't do it, right, you're not going to make progress. So you got to do the work. Hey, Shirley Tipton Weatherton, it's been 2 years ago today since I lost my husband, and this is absolutely right, like you said, with the workout. Yes, thank you for sharing that. And um, yeah, we're sending special love your way today. Today is 2 years ago. Sending special love your way. It's absolutely true, right? Absolutely true. And think about this, there's so many different, we can take this workout analogy so many different ways, because when you do it, you kind of hate to do it. It's painful to do it, but you feel so much better afterwards, right? I don't want to do this. I don't want to go through this. How you go through it, you push through, you even cry when you work out sometimes, you scream, all of this stuff, but you feel so much better afterwards, right? You feel so much better afterwards. Same thing with sitting in that grief form. I don't want to do it. I don't want to go to therapy. I don't want to go to counseling. But you do. And afterwards, you be like, whew, I feel so much better, right? And so it's so very important. And the more you do it, the further along your journey that you are. The more you don't do it, right? Stuck, stalled, stagnant, stale, right? Because you're not progressing. So we want to get to the point where we are progressing, where we are moving forward, where we are sitting in the womb of our grief, wallowing in our pain, taking the time to do just that so we can progress on our grief journey. So thank y'all for sharing. I hope and pray y'all have a phenomenal Friday and a wonderful weekend. Praying for y'all. Love y'all. I'm rooting for each and every one of y'all. Come on, let's continue to go. Let's grow. Be all that God desires for us to be.